Why Terraform code order does not matter. Today we fix a common beginner fear. The fear is this: if I write my Terraform in the wrong order, it will break. In Terraform, that is usually not true, and the reason is not magic. It is a system. When Terraform loads your configuration, it does two separate jobs. First, it reads your declarations. Second, it builds a relationship map between them. Order is not the input that controls the outcome. Relationships are. Terraform is not a script runner. It is a planner. Text order is the order your eyes see. Dependency order is the order Terraform must obey. Terraform only cares about dependency order. Dependency order comes from references, and occasionally from the depends on meta argument. If nothing depends on anything else, Terraform is free to choose. Terraform scans expressions. It looks for places where one object needs data from another. That creates an edge in the graph. A depends on B, so B must exist first. That is the core mechanism. The graph is Terraform's internal truth, and that truth is independent of file layout. Before any graph can change real infrastructure, Terraform must have an identity. An identity is how the provider API recognizes the caller. That identity comes from the execution environment, not from the position of a block in a file. So even if your configuration is perfectly ordered, it can still fail. If the identity has no permission or points at the wrong account. When people think order matters, they are often seeing a different problem. They are seeing a missing logical reference, not a syntax error, but a place where a hard-coded value was used, instead of linking one object to another. Terraform only understands relationships you explicitly declare. Terraform cannot depend on what you meant. Most dependencies are implicit. They come from using data from one object inside another. That is usually the best case, because the dependency is real, and Terraform can prove it. But if you don't create the reference, Terraform won't infer it, even if the real world would require an order. Sometimes the real world has a dependency, but there is no data reference Terraform can see. In those cases, you need an explicit dependency, not because Terraform is weak, but because the dependency is outside the model you wrote. This is where mature Terraform users slow down, because explicit dependencies can hide design problems, but sometimes they are the correct tool. When Terraform sees no dependency, it may act in parallel. Parallelism is not a bonus feature. It is a consequence of the graph. If the graph is missing edges, Terraform may do actions in an unsafe order. Not unsafe for Terraform, unsafe for your system. This is how outages happen with valid configurations. Here's the mental model. Terraform does not execute top to bottom. Terraform resolves a graph. Then it proposes actions. Then it executes actions in an order that satisfies dependencies. You control outcomes by expressing relationships, not by rearranging blocks. When something behaves strangely, ask one question: what does Terraform think depends on what? Not what you think depends on what. Terraform follows the graph you wrote, even when it disagrees with your intuition. In the next lesson, we will name this internal map, and we will treat it like a first-class object because it explains most Terraform surprises.